Welcome to Lunatic Astrology. I'm your astrologer, Lori Lothy, and today we're talking with astrologer Moses Siregar. I'm not sure I said his name right, who's a very in-depth Vedic slash contemporary slash tropical zodiac astrologer. So he blends both the sidereal astrology and the tropical zodiac of Western astrology, which means to say he's very, very interesting. We're going to talk about the very dire situation in the Ukraine with regards to the invasion by Russia. And we're going to hopefully get some insights on what may be happening in the near future there. This recording is being made on March the 14th. So we're just waiting for him to pop into the room today. Hey guys, so here we have Moses, and you can find his website, by the way, at astrologyforthesoul.com. Now, he is actually also a relocational astrologer looking at how the sky will line up in a different way, no matter like wherever you move from your birthplace, and some of the influences of the planetary bodies, depending on where you move, live, or stay. And I think that's going to be really interesting to look at that, and also in the context today of the Ukraine. In fact, he's quite well known for this kind of work. So welcome today, Moses, to our little show where we talk about the Ukraine.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm not going to say much because I've done 2 videos already, and I'll probably be doing another one in the next week called "Is Putin a Madman?" It's actually going to be called "Is He the Mad King?" because I really think his chart's an absolute fascination. But I don't want to also just make light of this. It's a very, very difficult situation. People are suffering in the Ukraine. People's lives have been deeply disrupted. I want to say that, one of the things I was looking at in the chart of Putin recently that really got my eye was that there's something called a solar return chart that is to take the sun back to where it was when you were born, and then what is the sky lined up like at that moment. And in his solar return chart, I was not surprised, but I was also like, wow, kind of wowed, I guess is the right word, that in October, his birthday is October 7th, when the sun returned to its degree of 13 Libra, where it was when he was born, the rising sign in the place of his birth, St. Petersburg, was Leo. But more importantly, his ascendant was sitting at 29 degrees of Leo, which is a very important fixed star called Regulus, and it means little king, and often born to rule and all of that. And there's a bit of a downside to that star. Donald Trump has that star on his rising sign natally. You can go to great heights of power, but you also stand the chance of falling just as far down. So him aspiring to act like a king and during the age that he's at is fascinating to me. And in Hellenistic astrology, he's also in a 10th house profection year, which means he's aspiring to achieve that which is promised to him in his natal 10th house of career and reputation. And so he's got all of this energy about sort of putting himself at the top of the sky and being this kind of force, you know what I mean, of leader, king, ruler. And when you think about king, I just want to pause that thought for a minute. We just think of kings now in our modern world, like Queen Elizabeth and stuff, as sort of they're more symbolic than they are real, you know what I mean? But in the real ancient tradition of kingships were about kingdoms and kingdom building and kingdom expansion. Kings were often, of course, sending people off to war to expand their kingdom, as we all well know. And so with this sort of 10th house age in which he's focused on his reputation, his ambition, his career, where his midheaven lies, if his birth time is 9:30 a.m., which I'm using, and it seems to line up. And then lastly, I want to say he's got the asteroid Ukraine, it's called Ukraina, on his Pluto, on his midheaven in his house of career. I often ponder with astrology how someone can be born with the asteroid Ukraine on his midheaven, career / purpose drive, Pluto, death and power and tyranny and despotism as well. There's his destiny was always bound to Ukraine. And lastly, Ukraine used to be a part of the Soviet Union, and before the Soviet Union used to be a part of ancient Russia. And a lot of people speak Russian there, and there's our separatist movements have always wanted to go back to Russia. So it's a complicated story, and he's wanting to reclaim the kingdom, you see what I mean, of the place that used to be a part of Russia. And Ukraine means little Russia. So I wanted to talk about Putin just in that way and say there's a lot of energy around this. It is a destined play that's coming through the sky. So now I would love to hear, Moses, how you feel. I'm happy to see you screen share some things about how this looks to you from both your perspective as an astrologer in general, and maybe through the eyes of relocational energies.
Okay. Were you looking with Putin? I'm looking at his solar return, like kind of the current year, as well as for the next year coming up. But the piece you're going to write about his kind of mental state, was that based partly on the return? Because I can see some stuff in the return that looks a bit like that.
Yeah, well, this Mars is all mashed up in that stellium, right? I have to go pull it back up. I put it back down. Yeah, I can grab that chart. Let me share it with the people then before we move to relocational, and everyone can see what I'm seeing. So it's not just me. Let me grab that and let me put a solar return
chart if you want to see it.
Do you want to put his return chart up?
Sure. All right, let's see. So we're going to go with his
October 7th, 21 solar return. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've got that here. I'll share this one. Okay, so this one is actually, this one's set to Moscow, and then this one is St. Petersburg. So yeah, the 29 Leo rising, Porphyry house cusp.
Exactly, and you're using Placidus?
This is Porphyry houses.
Porphyry, okay, Porphyry house system. Okay, so everyone who's listening who's an astrology geek, he's using an actual ancient astrology house system. Is one of the older ones, usually used for length of life determination. But I use whole sign houses, but still we see that rising sign right on the star Regulus. Yes, at 29 Leo.
Yeah, I've been using Porphyry for about 28 years as an astrologer, and it's not just what the ancient astrologers thought it was. It's a really full-bodied, incredible house system. I have a ton of experience with it. And so, but this solar return has this Sun-Mars conjunction in Libra, and that's within a degree. That's like about half a degree. So that's a very combust, debilitated Mars in the solar return with a retrograde Mercury conjunct the moon. So I was wondering if that was part of what you were writing about when you're wondering if you sort of have
Yeah, there's some other things too going on, but that is definitely one of them. And, to look at that Mars basically having that proximity to the sun, I mean, that is a Mars who's basically just about to die. On October the 8th, the sun joined with Mars, and Mars was Cazimi, or in the heart of the sun. And that is the death of a very old Mars, a 2-year-old warrior, beleaguered, been around the zodiac for 2 years, is really tired and beaten up. And he's just about to be reborn and then rise a month later into visibility. So in that sense, to me, this is like he's going into battle, Putin, with this Mars that is tired. It's tired. The sun is not yet there. This is still an old Mars. So I mean, there is a reason I'd say that Putin was tired, or a beleaguered warrior. He's been angsting against the NATO/European Union /Western incursion into Ukraine, changing the culture, insisting that maybe, or hinting that it could become a part of NATO, which is a total disregard of all the agreements that were made back in 1991, as well as breaking of the Minsk Accord agreements. And so one thing he's been doing is he's been holding this grudge, maybe fairly and maybe not, against what's been going on for a long time. And he's like tired. Like, this is him going into battle, but he's already exhausted.
Interesting. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, so there's a lot we can talk about. I mean, I do locational work mostly with clients. I've been doing astrology for a long time, so I can kind of like dabble into stuff like this. And I've been writing a lot of mundane stuff for the last few years. So I'm kind of getting more into that. But yeah, so I do holistic astrology. That's my name for it. So it's, among other things, it uses Western and Vedic, or tropical and sidereal. And it's, I think it's, I guess I'm just going to share my opinions with you guys. I think astrology is still a little bit in the dark ages, in the sense that we have half the people who like to look at it one way and half the people who like to look at it another way. That's kind of Western and Vedic. And I think it's silly. I think it's utterly silly that you have all these intelligent people who don't recognize that the other half of the world has this incredibly rich system with, it doesn't mean everybody has to study all of it. You have to practice both. But my work, I do a lot of locational work. So I do take on this responsibility of trying to help people figure out what will happen if you live in St. Louis, what will happen if you live in London, what will happen if you live in, Singapore. And therefore, I can't cut corners. I have to look at everything I can look at to try to understand that, because I don't want to make mistakes, because that's life and death stuff. So I find that they're both quite useful. And essentially, I would say tropical astrology is very full-bodied. It's very psychological, but it's also, external. It's kind of like, in a way, I think it's more complete by itself, tropical astrology. But to use it with sidereal, I would argue is also a vast improvement compared to just using tropical. And I would argue that tropical is again more of like the seasons, we experience them, like winter and summer. And the sidereal is more like the stars, which we look at from a great distance, and it gives us this objective view of things at a great distance. So one of the things I found interesting with what's going on right now in Ukraine So first of all, and I wrote about a number of these things, ahead of time. You can go to my, I tend to put most of my stuff on my Facebook. It's Astrology, the Cosmic Mirror with Moses Siregar. And I've been writing about this stuff a bit. And, we're in a historical moment. So, when we're in a big historical moment, it's interesting to look at the astrology and say, well, what's different, right? Because we have these cycles all the time, right? Venus conjoins Mars all the time and all these things. But not quite like recently, right? It's a bit different when you look at what's really going on now. Why is this a unique moment? What makes it special? What are some of the signs in the heavens that we're pointing at it, right? We're in the middle of it, so we have a little hindsight and a little foresight, hopefully, here. So one of the things that was quite interesting is the conjunction of Venus, Mars, and Pluto around 27 Capricorn in tropical astrology. That's also Capricorn in sidereal astrology. And that's the exaltation degree of Mars. So that is where in the zodiac, that is the 1 degree that is the most like Mars, and especially in an exaltation capacity. Really strong Mars, really, overemphasized Mars in some respect. And what happened, right? So, and as soon as Mars conjoined Pluto, Russia conquered the first city. They took Kherson, and that's now under Russian control. So Venus, Mars, Pluto conjoined, and there was a lot of, there's a lot of nuclear symbolism there too. And a lot of astrologers, I'm sure, are mentioning that. I'd mentioned some stuff. Chernobyl was taken right away, right? And then this next nuclear plant was being fired upon right away. And so right away, we're like, oh my God, is there about to be a nuclear, event?
Yeah. And may I add to that?
Please.
Yeah, I agree with you. There was this sense of, that exaltation degree with Venus, Pluto being extremely portentous. But the other thing is that the invasion chart for the time of the invasion around 5 a.m. On the 24th and using Kharkiv, because that's where the invasion actually happened, not in Kiev or Kyiv. And that invasion chart is rising with Pluto on the ascendant. Absolutely. Like really intense energy that's already embedded in the date of the actual and the time of the actual first incursion, actually crossing the border. So it really made me worry about that Plutonian, like Uranian / explosive quality to what's happening. Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, so I just changed that chart to Kherson. So it's 27 Cap rising in Kherson. So yeah, good find there for sure. Notice the Rahu right at the IC as well. So there's all that chaos coming to the homeland. So what was I going to say? That well, okay. So we have that 27 Capricorn. And now part of what made that very unusual is that Venus and Mars were tracking together within 1 degree of a conjunction from, if I'm not mistaken, February 11th to March 13th, which is just over a month. And that's unusual, right? We don't normally see Venus and Mars within 1 precise degree of one another for that long. And in Vedic astrology, that's called a planetary war. You have 2 planets within 1 degree of each other. They're in a planetary war. They're trying to get into the same chair in musical chairs, and they're fighting over it. And it becomes intense. It becomes more dramatic. So this is unusual because it lasted for so long, right? And it visited, Pluto at Mars's exaltation degree. And I believe while we did this, Mars squared, something from either the January 6th or the solstice. It kind of was connected there a little bit too. So that made it very unusual. Now, here's something else that makes it kind of unusual. Look at April 4th. I'm sure you've looked at that coming up with the Mars-Saturn conjunction. Here it is in tropical astrology. We're still sharing a screen, right? Yeah.
Yes.
It's going to be the 23rd degree of tropical Aquarius, which let's go ahead and look at the sidereal. Now, you've probably looked at things tropically. Now, I know a lot of you guys are thinking, oh my God, sidereal astrology, this is an abomination. But seriously, this is just another way to see the heavens.
Absolutely. I'm totally down with it. I use both of them myself. Yeah.
A lot of people do it in India. They don't, it's okay. And so here's what that conjunction looks like in sidereal. What do we see? 27 Capricorn.
That's interesting, Moses. Wow.
Or Saturn conjunction. So again, Mars is at his exaltation degree. Now it's sidereal, and now it's with Saturn instead of Pluto and Venus. And so I've been looking at this degree, which is also, as you can see in this chart, squaring the nodes at that time, right? I'm getting goosebumps right now, unfortunately, but it's squaring the nodes, which among other things says this is more significant. This is more, it's like they're roads going different directions very powerfully all at the same time. And it makes everything more intense, more karmic, more significant.
Yeah. And the 27th degree eclipse on fixed star Algol, a malefic star that happened on November 19th in Taurus, is really associated with like death and mayhem and calamity. And there's a lot of meanings to it, like the slaying of a head, like decapitating, which could unfortunately bode really unwell for I'm just going to say it. I'm really concerned that if Volodymyr Zelensky continues to persist in staying home in Ukraine, he may be at mortal peril.
I've already written that, and I never predicted that anyone would die, and I've only hinted like, okay, this guy's in danger right now, and I actually wrote that for Zelensky. Right when it was just getting started, before anyone knew really what was about to happen.
Oh, I didn't see that writing, but I agree. It's that decapitation energy of Algol at that 27 Taurus is, really a hot spot that keeps showing up with that 27 cap exaltation.
Well, I'm sorry, what was the event? I've been seeing the Algol with the North Node, but what was the moment or event that you were referring to with that one?
Oh, it was in November 19th eclipse.
Oh, the November 19th eclipse.
Taurus, yeah, in sidereal, yeah, Taurus eclipse.
Okay.
I mean, in tropical, it's to be the same.
Gotcha.
No, degree would be.
Well,
yeah.
So in this case, it's Algol. Yeah, it's Algol. So yeah,
It's Algol. It was exactly on Algol. The eclipse was on Taurus, 27.
And this is why when I wrote my piece, when this was all starting, and I, I didn't enjoy having to write this, but I wrote about how the North Node's at Algol, which is connected with piles and piles of corpses, for example. In a trine to Pluto, Venus, and Mars at the exaltation degree of Mars, it's pretty easy to make a prediction. There's going to be some bodies, there's going to be some corpses, and I did, and I hated having to make that prediction. Unfortunately, it's true, right? And we also have 2.5 million refugees who are fleeing the country, and God knows what's next, right? So, so this, again, why is this moment so significant historically? And again, you go back to that 4/4 Mars Saturn conjunction. So here are these two great symbols. There's the one right around the beginning of March, right when Russia took Kherson for the first time, and right around the time of the initial invasion. And then there's this. There's this, not even a month from now. This is very big, and I've been looking at it, a few different places too. But interesting that even if we think of like Mars and Saturn here in terms of dignity, it's interesting because Mars is exalted and at his exaltation degree, but Saturn's in his own sign. So both malefics are powerful, and sometimes when they're powerful, we get better results. Like maybe the malefic events involve cooler heads and they don't get to be as intense. But this isn't that case. This is the case of it's strong and it's too strong and it's bad.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I really, really want to go into this for a second, and happy birthday to me, April 4th, ducking under the covers. I kind of like, I also want to bring up the Kalasarpa yoga, and that Mercury won't break through until about, I think, the third week of April. So Mercury will be the first one to break the bounds of the North and South node. So everyone listening, that just simply means everybody's bundled on one half of the North node axes in the sky, all the major planets. And that is negative and darker omen energy, correct? You're more sidereal than I am.
Yeah, it's quite potent. It's the serpent of time. Trump was born with something like that too. So certain moments, certain people kind of take on this quality of you're a serpent that kind of expands through time and devours things. So yeah, it kind of has that like, oh boy, big serpent in the sky kind of feeling about it, and it is often quite intense.
But would we assume, though, that maybe some of this calamity that we're experiencing in the world with regards to the war drums beating, which, back in my video for YouTube on December 4th for the eclipse at 12 Sag, right on the United States ascendant, of the Sibley chart, I did say war drums was the name of my video, partly also because Mars was rising in Scorpio into visibility as well. So he's prone to beating a war drum in any of his own signs. But do you see a light on the horizon for this Ukrainian Russian situation?
I try, first of all, not to project too far ahead. And it's kind of like predicting the weather a year from now. It's like, what if something happens tomorrow and it just changes everything? Then my prediction doesn't really, but it's a fair question to ask, I think, for me, it's like before I can make probably a very intelligent, like a particularly good, kind of comment on that. Like I want to see what's going to happen in April. Obviously, I want to see what happens with this Mars Saturn conjunction. So let's look at it from a few different angles and just maybe start to put some of that together. I'm going to dodge your question for now. I did write that, I could very well see something happening to Zelenskyy and the Ukrainian government because Gary Lorenzen, who's an astrologer who's quite knowledgeable about Russia, he had pointed out, if you look at the Zelenskyy government, here's that chart. It's May 20, 2019, 10:23 a.m. in Kiev. This is when he started his administration, I believe. And so right now the progressions look like this. The moon is at 22 Capricorn, approaching Pluto at 22 Capricorn, almost 23. And so this is 2 weeks away. So, my feeling was, well, that could be the end of this government. That could be the end of certainly life as they knew it, right? It's certainly the end of the government as they knew it. That's obvious enough. But this is, it's another step of that maybe too. I mean, and so there's a legit thing, like, does this in 2 weeks, what does Kiev look like, right? In 2 weeks, what does the Zelenskyy government look like? And it looks like it's about to go through an awfully massive change. Again, Gary Lawrence had noted that, and it sort of fit into everything I was seeing in a lot of ways, as one of these strong possibilities. Let's look at the US chart for a moment. So here's that Sibley chart. And I've got July 476, 5:10 p.m. in Philadelphia. I do like this chart. I think it works well. Dane Rudger used it. Lots of people have used it. And let's put this in here as let's just think for a moment. 22 Aquarius. Right? Imagine 22 Aquarius. Where is that here? Well, it's approaching the moon. It's approaching this porphyry third house cusp. 22 Aquarius for this chart. It trines Mars for the US, right, which is over there in the 7th house in Gemini. And it's in what we would call quincunx, or 150-degree aspect to Mercury. And Mercury is a very interesting one for the US chart because it is in the 8th house. In the 8th house in whole signs, porphyry, equal house, all that, all the ones I use basically. It's 8th house, 8th house, 8th house, 8th house. And
so, Moses, can you remind me of the importance of 22 Aquarius? I didn't understand that.
Yeah, sorry. The 22-23 Aquarius is the Mars Saturn conjunction on April 4th.
Oh, okay.
So because that's a very key point, obviously. And so where's that? It's to the US, it actually forms a yod, right? Because Neptune's up there at 22 Virgo, Mercury's Cancer 24. So about 23 Aquarius is just about as perfect as we can get to a yod for the United States. Now, a yod is a pattern where we have 2 planets 60 degrees apart here. That's the Mercury-Neptune sextile on the US chart here. And then they're both 150 to 23 Aquarius. Where that Saturn and Mars conjunction is going to be. So a yod tends to feel like fate. It tends to feel like this finger of God going, things are going that way. And then they just
you can stir the pot there, because in the chart of the modern Ukraine, which was born August 24th, 1991, we actually have a birth time for that as well. Yep. 22 Aquarius is a really hot spot in the sky as well. It happens to be the moon in the first house, whole sign house of the Ukraine. Okay. That's like a really intense area of sky.
Right. No, in fact, look at it. That's the moon for Ukraine. That's Ukraine's moon. It's 22 Aquarius.
Yeah, exactly. What I was just saying. Yeah. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah. It's not, here's the thing. It's not only the moon. It's not only 22 Aquarius, which is an absolute direct hit, right? But it is the second house cusp of this chart, if you use a porphyry house system. And so that is an extraordinarily second house moment. And as we know from the Hellenistic astrology, sometimes it feels like going to hell, the gate to Hades. And I can tell you from
Hades.
Now, a lot of people don't know what that means. I didn't know what that means until I've been doing locational astrology for decades, and I test this. I'm like, what does it mean when you go to the gate to Hades? And what it means is, if you put something there that is very difficult, it will take you to hell. And if you get tough transits on it, it will take you to that tough place. It's not the only thing it'll do. That's one thing it can do. And so when I see that cusp, I'm like, okay, is this person about to go to some kind of personal hell? Is Ukraine about to go to some kind of personal hell on April 4th? It looks like it. It looks very much like it. And that opposes Jupiter and Mercury retrograde. Interesting that the Ukraine and the US both have this retrograde Mercury in the 8th, both of which are going to be aspected by this Mars-Saturn conjunction. So that conjunction is opposing a retrograde Mercury, which will act more chaotic. Jupiter over there in the 8th house. And there's this, let's just think about Ukraine for a minute. Does this look like Ukraine? What do we know about Ukraine? I mean, it's awfully 8th house, this chart, And so, I mean, we're looking at 1991. This is the most significant thing, I guess, that's happened to Ukraine since then. And what are we thinking about? We're thinking about, death, destruction, war. And so there's all this kind of like I think the Venus and Mars retrograde in the 8th house. We get into all that behind the scenes stuff. Like, remember how Trump was trying to get Biden in trouble, right? That whole thing that he got impeached over and all that. Yeah. Like, you kind of see this kind of backhanded 8th housey financial
secrets, things that are hidden from view. And also, even thinking about the eclipse cycle itself, especially that 27-degree Taurus eclipse, basically seems to be activating that stellium of planets in Leo. So squaring those 8th house planets, Venus, Mercury, and all of that. So, you really have this awakening of whatever this kind of backroom energy or the secrets, hidden secrets. There's a whole Biden with his son Hunter scandal that's still playing out now. There was all this, there has been a lot of intervention by the United States and other countries in Ukraine. Ukraine has become, even as during there was these trials in the United States. I mean, these like Congress meetings that were public. I can't remember which ones. And one of the state senators or one of the Congress people noted, one of the big ones, like Lindsey Graham, I can't remember who. Well, yes, he basically admitted to proxy war in Ukraine. He basically said we need to militarize and fund, and finance the Ukrainian military so that we don't have to fight Russia over here. That's what he said. Don't have to fight Russia over here. So there's a proxy war that is going on against Russia through the Ukraine as a satellite energy. And so there's just that eighth house stuff, it's like, it is what you do behind the scenes and things that are hidden from view.
I don't know if it's a full proxy war. We haven't committed troops and I'm uncomfortable with that language. You're welcome to own it. I'm not going to own it, but I'm gonna get back to this.
Well, no, it's a stealth proxy war. Okay, it's a stealth proxy war. It was one of your senators or one of your Congress people who said we fund them so we don't have to fight Russia over here, and that is a public quote.
Proxy war. That's an ally, and we're giving them aid. We're giving them military aid. We do that to plenty of countries. It does not mean Ukraine was meant to be a neutral state, a buffer state between the West and Russia. And we're not going to agree on that. Obviously, let's just move on. So Mars and Saturn are conjoined at the moon here, coming up on April 4th. Not only is that the homeland, not only is that the people, it's mothers, it's children, it's it's Aquarius, it's the unity, right? It's everything that we're loving about Ukraine right now as it's under all this pressure, right? And it's about to get completely slammed, completely and totally slammed by the two traditional malefic planets, while they oppose Jupiter, Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde, and the sun, right, in their 8th house. This is bad news. This is not what you want to see in a chart. This is awful. This is death, destruction, and it's terrible. I hate talking about this. I swear to God, I hate it. This is really disturbing. And looking at this, again, I want to show you a few charts that have this kind of thing. And so,
and in the whole sign house system, the moon in the Ukraine is in the 1st house. Was also, you could say, there's an incredible identity crisis going on here for that that nation.
Oh, totally, yeah. So back to the Sibley chart. So that's quite significant to the U.S. here. It's that yod we were talking about, this finger of God, right? And where does it point? So it points at the 3rd cusp, in fact, as Saturn and Mars are moving to the US's moon. And the 3rd cusp is another one that's quite sensitive, actually, like the 2nd. And the reason I think, well, mostly is Vedic astrology, and it's tested through all my stuff, but the 3rd cusp is the 8th from the 8th, or the 3rd house is the 8th from the 8th. It's one of those derivative houses things.
Yep.
So the 3rd house will behave very much like the 8th house. And particularly when you put stuff there that is kind of nasty, that's going to bring out more of the difficult side of it. So I never like to see difficult things at the 2nd cusp or the 3rd cusp, because they can take you to hell, or essentially 3rd house, essentially the same thing, take you to the 8th house, which, we can also call that a bit of hell too sometimes. So it's really tough for the US, but particularly with the node, right? With the yod, I mean to say, because we're getting into that retrograde Mercury in the 8th, and that's a house of death. People die in that house, right? And there's a retrograde Mercury, so there's this element of chaos to it. It's in Cancer, it stirs us up, really emotionally, and and then it aspects that Neptune up there as well. So that's like, okay, is it hitting us? Yeah, actually, there's a finger of God saying Mars at his sidereal exaltation degree conjunct Saturn, is doing a number on your Mercury and your Neptune.
So are you worried? Are you thinking the United States might become directly involved in an actual ground war? Or are you just looking at that as sort of an emotional component within the peoples of the world, including the United States?
I don't know, but I think we have to consider, I shared a link today about what to happen, how to survive your first nuclear attack, get underground, et cetera, et cetera. So what do we know? Don't look up, right?
Well, absolutely possible. I don't like Putin having Regulus on his ascendant, because there is a bit of the Mad King Nero, Rome is burning vibe, when that is not the best placement for his temporary identity over the next year as he's at that age. So it does, and he 10th house perfection age coming into direct contact with that Pluto in his chart, with that Ukraine on his chart. Pluto, Ukraine, it's in his chart. The asteroid's there. Does that mean power over Ukraine? Possibly. Does it mean nuclear exchange involving Ukraine? I could as well. So it's really daunting. And it's worrisome, because I don't see that. I'm more worried about an incident than I am about a nuclear weapon being launched, crossfire near a nuclear reactor or something.
Yeah. When I was a younger astrologer in my 20s in the 1990s, I remember the first time I saw that the US was going to have a Pluto return. I remember thinking about it. And, at that point, my thought was, when this was seemed so far off in the distance, right? Like it's science future 2022, what the hell is that? Science fiction, my first thought was, there's going to be a nuclear thing. Like we dropped nuclear bombs on a country. Okay. I don't know how that works karmically, because we sort of, ended World War II earlier. We would have had to kill a lot more Japanese, apparently, if we didn't, that's way above my pay grade and all that. But what happens when Pluto returns to you and you've dropped 2 nuclear bombs on another country? I don't know. But I know what I do know is what has started is Russia invaded Ukraine, took Chernobyl and a bunch of nuclear plants, right? Putin's threatening that if anyone sort of supports Ukraine, they'll be considered combatants and fully, and he's threatening to nuke them. So we're in an age where we have to be like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be nuked in a minute. Like, I don't know. Like, we're back to that. Like we're back to that.
And I am concerned because of the fact that, apparently, but this is the news that I know, Putin had put a bunch of money, basically saved a lot of money for a rainy day. The debt of the country of Russia is really low. It's one of the lowest in the world. They really are kind of flush with cash. And he put,
I'm not sure. Go ahead.
No, $600 billion of reserve currency.
But they owe quite a bit of money too. I've been watching quite a bit of news.
No, but here's a story. He put 300 billion away in other countries, which now Russia's been denied access to their own savings, basically. So now he's down to the money that's the gold stores and the money that's still in the Russian system. So in a sense, there has been, he didn't probably anticipate that this was going to be the consequence. I don't know. They was thinking why wouldn't he have taken $300 billion out of other countries where it was in other banking systems and brought it back home, other than alerting people that he's up to no good. So my concern is the sanctions, and he said this is an act of war against my country. He said that the sanctions alone are putting him in a corner. Yep. That's all I mean. It's like he's been put in a real corner around how long can he wage or sustain a war without deep economic hardship beyond what's already here. He's still exporting oil. You know what I mean? He's still exporting oil. So that's not the issue. The United States is is a minor player in the oil exports. And finally, he made a deal with China during the Beijing Olympics for a 30-year gas deal. So he's already bridging away from the West, but that bridge hasn't been built yet. So right now he's in this corner, and that's alarming, because what desperate people do is alarming.
Yeah. But I can show you quite a few things here if you want me to.
Sure. Yeah. Let's go ahead. We have a few more minutes. I have about 10.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
That's okay. Let's go for it. Come on. Let's see what we can do in 10 minutes.
I will do my best. I'd hope to have a little more time to talk, but that's okay. Let's see. So Joe Biden here. So look at this for him, right? So 23 Aquarius, 22, 23 Aquarius. It's like you want to see how this plays out with different players, right? I mean, this is squaring his 12th house Mercury. So, there are foreign matters in the 12th house, like this Vedic thing, foreign countries is 12th house. And so, his dealings, his connections, his allies, some of that is secret, obviously, in the 12th house. It's not all public information. But there's something going on with him there that puts things at a crisis point, I think, with some of his foreign allies as the South Node goes over his Mercury. And I want to show some stuff for Russia. It's really quite interesting. But The South Node to his Mercury shows that this is not like going his way completely either. You know, there's something that is quite difficult as this is happening, even as Jupiter is trining it. So it's going to be very interesting to pay attention to his Mercury, I think, coming up with the trine from Jupiter, the square from Mars and Saturn, the conjunction with the South Node. But this one is in a quincunx to, because the looks like the conjunction is going to be about 22 roughly. That's weird. Look at this, 22. Remember how the whole thing started like with all the 22, all the 22 numbers, and now we got the 4 coming up. It's like, okay, the numerology is kind of weird too.
Yeah.
But it does have the quincunx to this 8th house exalted Jupiter retrograde. Again, there's these retrograde 8th house planets that we're seeing this quincunx to, like houses of death, destruction, mayhem, and all the awful stuff we don't want anyone to experience. You know, look at it for Russia. Now, Russia's chart, this is the December 25th, 1991. Essentially this 21 Leo rising. I was talking to someone today about trying to get the info right, but 21 Leo rising is this chart. Now this is, I think this is very interesting for Russia. And Russia, you know, the first thing I wrote when I made my first predictions about it was basically, you know, and this one we'll see if I turn out to be right or wrong about it. But the first thing I said was I think Russia's going to get what they want more or less militarily. It's an awful moment. It's brutal. I think I did say Russians were going to fight like Ukrainians would fight like hell, but they just seem like more powerful to me. But I thought the consequences for Russia were going to be really, really severe at the same time. And you know, this starts getting to that a little bit. So we're going to look here April 4th for Russia. First thing I focused on there, which really made a lot of sense to me, and I think for Russia, this is very concerning. You know, they have this Venus-Pluto conjunction, 22 Scorpio, 21, 22, 23. The South Node's right there right now. Well, actually, on April 4th, it'll be right there at 23. This is, of course, in a square to that Saturn-Mars conjunction on the descendant of the Russia chart, which is squaring the Venus and Pluto conjunction, which is conjoined with the South Node at that time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and that 7th house meaning your visible enemies, really. So
now, yes, agreed. Yeah, so like they could have very strong enemies. They do. They could also have allies, you know, and I do think this suggests that they will be pulling on whatever alliances they can pull on. And I think we're about to find out with this event what kind of alliances they have, right? You know, I mean, I know they're using fighters from different places and stuff like that. So this seems like their relationship to the world, to other countries, right, becomes critical. And I think that some of it is maybe going to war or you know, conflict with some of them, and some of them is alliances too.
Well, certainly, yeah, with Venus there, like treaties and peace, and hopefully trying to make something friendly.
That's true too. And I would say take Venus out. I would say the same exact thing, because Saturn's in Aquarius. He's got dignity. That's his Digbala, which is in Vedic. When Saturn is in the West, that's his strong direction, because that's where he can really work with people. So there's this ability to work with people, especially Saturn in Aquarius. We're working with governments, working with this and that. But Mars is in there too, right? So it's you know, there's all kinds of relationship problems that Russia.
Well, who are allies to Russia other than China?
I mean, there were like
Germany. Germany's got a big gas deal with them.
But Germany's not their ally at all. Germany's
not really an ally, but unfortunately they really hooked up an oil or gas deal with Russia before this happened.
Right, but Germany decided not to go with Russia. They decided, nope, we're not going to stay with you on the pipeline. We're going to actually increase our defense spending by 100 billion, if I'm not mistaken, which they had not done. Like Germany doesn't spend 100 billion on defense. They just said we're spending 100 billion on defense now. So Germany's now in the military game again. So Germany did have a decision. You're right. They had a decision. Do we want to stay with Russia and keep this pipeline going, get nice, you know, fossil fuel energy coming in here, or stay with NATO, and what Germany believes in. You know, Germany's one of the most ethical countries on the planet at this point, right? Because they don't want to fight anymore, right? And they're very reluctantly spending 100 billion on So all these alliances are changing, right? And I do think that, you know, in terms of alliances that they may have, I mean, you know, I don't, we'll see. I mean, there's Belarus or China. There's like 5 countries that didn't want to go against them. India is still kind of cozy with them a little bit. But here's what is possible, I think, with this too, is that this is really bad news for Russia, like awfully bad news for Russia. Because look at that Venus and Pluto, which in a way is their power. It's their financial power, which comes from the ground. It's Pluto, it's oil, right? It's Scorpios, all this gas stuff. This is power, and it's their military too. It's how they control everything. They control everybody. You can't say what you think in Russia. You can't be gay, right? You can't do all these things, right? So this is Russia. This is this super scorpionic, controlling as hell energy there that does whatever they do. And Scorpio is not always ethical. Let's face it, right? I mean, Putin's famous for poisoning people. I mean, Russia's done all kinds of
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It doesn't look great for Russia at all. No, you're right. It definitely looking to me like with that South Node contact on that square to Saturn Mars, that they bit off, or Putin bit off a great attempt for regaining a homeland in his mind at the cost of what happens in his actual homeland.
Right. Right. And so this is so serious that, like, because it's at the fourth, now look at the ascendant, 21 Leo. So 21 Scorpio, 22 Scorpio is, if I can plug in my computer before it turns off, is the, sorry, 1 second. There we go. So, what was I saying? The 21, 22 Scorpio, it's right at that fourth house position for them. So even though it seems like it's just kind of fourth house here, when you notice the degree, you'll notice, no, this is really, 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 really significant for Russia. And the South Node, again, from Vedic astrology, I'm used to thinking the South Node is often this kind of like intense influence that comes around and kind of ends things, criticizes things, brings a lot of karma, brings completion. So what does it mean for Russia to have some super intense karmic completion, right, around all of the shady stuff they've done, right, from including oil, including their money, including all these powerful, the oligarchs who are getting all their money taken away. So this is what we're seeing, is the oligarchs, their yachts are being taken away. That's South Node to Venus in the fourth house, right? Like, we have your yacht now, it's ours. And so this is really devastating for Russia. And because it is right at the bottom of the chart, it is the homeland. I have to wonder, is Russia going to be attacked? Now, that's a very scary thought, because what will they do if they are attacked?
Yeah, and also, yeah, it's really daunting. When Ukraine was born as a new nation back in 1991, that asteroid Ukraine, which is really a cool little punctuation mark, it's really around 20, I think it was around 26 degrees or so of the 10th house of modern Ukraine, and it's also conjunct the Pluto and midheaven of Putin's natal chart. So there's this kind of like weird intensity going on in those Scorpio degrees, and it's just all kind of a big pile up. It's almost like it almost reminds me of when a bunch of people pile up on top of somebody, you know what I mean, like a pile up, like to like say like cops piling up on one person or something. There's like a pile up of stuff going between the Ukraine chart and Scorpio. Putin's midheaven is down there on the Pluto. Putin's midheaven is on the Pluto Venus of modern Russia. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. With the asteroid Ukraine, and with that South Node, I sometimes think of the South Node as like when you have like an inner tube or a floaty toy, and someone pulls the plug and you start losing air. Like, it's where something is coming into a decrease of some sort, and so there's this, yeah. But that decrease is connected to the Russian homeland. It's also connected to the midheaven Pluto combination in the chart of Vladimir Putin. So coming to a decrease. There are a lot of people speculating with his puffy face that he's on steroids, which is not good for aggression. And then he may be ill, which is another whole chart to do at some point. But whatever is going on with him, I'm not really thinking that he's going to be doing so great either as this South Node transit continues.
Well, I mean, certainly considering, like, I've seen some of that too, but like, for Russia, this is terrible. I mean, and places that are often connected traditionally with death, we mentioned the 8th is one that you could do, but the descendant, right? The 7th house is kind of the sunset. And the bottom of the chart, right? That's the end of the matter. That's the grave. So to have the IC and kind of like the descendant is sort of like an IC here with the 90 degrees from the ascendant position. 2 points that are about death. We got Saturn and Mars. We have Pluto in Scorpio. We got the South Node in Scorpio. So there's, we go back to the North Node is at the star Algol, which astrologers have considered quite inauspicious, in a lot of ways, and literally connected with piles of corpses, right? So this is not times that we like to have to interpret the heavens, but it is what's going on. And so, for Russia, this is very, very, very pivotal, very devastating. I mean, this will be a huge turning point for them. So I have to wonder, are they going to be attacked? Are they going to have a key alliance, change in some way that doesn't benefit them? Maybe they will get, someone that helps them too. But like everything they're losing there in that fourth house, they're losing the goodwill of their people, they're losing their money, they're losing their yachts, right? They're using all this international goodwill, and they're going to get hit really squarely, and that may be unfortunately super bad news for the planet, so we just have to.
Well, here I have a thought. But we have to finish up, unfortunately. Vladimir Putin is terrified of being poisoned, but he's born with Mars on the fixed star Shala in his second house, which simply means that he's got a valid reason to be worried about the stinger of the scorpion Shala actually on Mars in the second house of things that go in your mouth, that he could be poisoned. And the thing about that is that maybe that Mars square from the seventh house of visible enemies to his own midheaven south node, Pluto, Ukraine thing, is that one day his worst fear will come true. And of course, if he is poisoned, it won't look like he's poisoned, but we'll assume he was poisoned. No one's going to give him something obvious. It'd be like, he had a stroke or something. So, I mean, honestly, if the powers that be around the world want to end this situation, they know that the spear of the tip of the spear is Putin.
Yeah.
It's not his military, it's not his people. And if Putin dies for some reason, suddenly, that's also what you could be seeing in the Ukraine chart, in the Russia chart, just reminding you that, of course, Putin's midheaven, Pluto, Ukraine are also on that fourth house placement we just looked at. So out of my, Mars is poisons and stuff and secret bad things that are stealthy sometimes. And from the house of visible enemies squaring that combination of factors, his worst fear is being poisoned. He's got a valid reason to fear it in his natal sky.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I watched an interview with someone recently, and she sat with Putin and talked to him at dinner and interviewed him or something or other. And she noticed he didn't touch his food or his drink. If
I were him, I would definitely have those people who do it for me. The tasters and the testers. Oh my gosh. This has been so sorry. This has been such a great talk. We've talked for about 45 minutes, but my client is coming in the room now. So I'm going to have to end our call so that I can go do my other work. So Moses, people can find you at the soulastrology.com and relocational astrology.
I'm sorry. It's astrology. It's astrologyforthesoul.com.
For the soul. I apologize. I got it right in the beginning. Astrologyforthesoul.com.
Yeah.
And the link will be
Moses
in the description.
Astrology. Sorry about that. Sorry to interrupt you. They can just Google Moses and astrology. They would find it too, but thank you.
Moses and astrology, and the link will be in the description box to go check it out. And yeah, he'll make sure that when you move to a new country or a new town or a new city, you're not moving to the gates of Hades.
Yeah. Can I have 10 seconds? This was a client of mine who came to me. She was actually in Kiev in like a couple months ago, and she was really wanting to stay because her friends and family were there. And I really told her very, very emphatically, something got into me. I was like, I just told her how effing bad it was. She has a parent there of Jupiter, Mars, there's a parent of Sun and Neptune. Here's her chart. It's like, I can show you some things, but basically I saw enough things in the chart and the map to say, I really, 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 really don't think this is what you want, what you are looking for, what you're telling me what you're looking for. And so she left February 11th. And I'm pretty happy about that. So that's what I get to do for
that is a really good example of how relocational astrology saves the day.
Thank you.
Seriously. Yeah. Seriously. And believe me, when I move next, this is who I'm going to, guys. I am a very neophyte relocational astrologer type. I know the basics and I took a couple of courses, but I would not go anywhere without checking in with Moses, because I know that is his heart's desire and what you're really good at and what you've really done years and years of deep research and work in. So just, I mean that. I'm not moving to let you and I talk.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Take care, Moses. That was really enjoyable, very feisty, and I hope people got something out of it. And you have a great afternoon.
All right. Thank you too. Bye-bye.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.